So as the coloured images for chapter 93 of the Dragon Ball Super manga start to come out and are unveiled, we get a glimpse at the retelling or the summarization of the Broly movie events in the manga arc. Now, even though we have seen a few coloured images of Broly vs Goku and Vegeta before, for example in chapter 42, that coloured version's been out for a long time. Then of course there's the image where Broly's being defeated by Gogeta Blue. This represents further demonstrations of what Broly's hair colour looked like at those particular times. Now this even shows Broly whilst he's fighting Goku Blue and Vegeta Blue, and also against Gogeta Blue. It also gives us further insight into whether Broly has the Ikari state in the manga or not, and we'll go over that in a moment, because the colouring of these images, of the panels that Toyotaro usually does in black and white to begin with, really gives us a further insight into Broly's power. But what this really has done has sparked further debate as to whether Broly has the Ikari state or the Legendary Super Saiyan state, otherwise known as Super Saiyan Full Power, which we'll talk about in this video, and whether or not it affects his power scaling per se. Now obviously there's been 4 movies that basically are adaptations of Dragon Ball Super arcs. There's the Battle of Gods movie, which we did get a manga adaptation for, even though it was very short. The Resurrection of F arc was skipped, but we've had lots of flashbacks and retellings of that arc from character perspectives. Then there's the Broly movie, which wasn't really covered at all, but we get the summarization, like I said, in chapter 93, which we'll be covering in just a moment. And then there's the superhero arc, which basically got fully adapted and extended. So for the Broly movie, for a long time, a lot of the fandom, what they've essentially done is continue to use the Broly movie events and the narrative from that particular movie as a placeholder before we get any further information. Now none of this summarization for me really cancels out what happens in the movie. The movie was penned by Toriyama himself, the author of the series, so it at least gives you an idea what his intentions were. But some people do point out that Toei had a lot of influence, and it was Toei that gave Broly the green tint because of the initial Z Broly having the green tint to his hair. So people argue that that doesn't necessarily make its way into the manga adaptation for Broly. Now let me know what you think down in the comment section. Do you think the Broly movie is still a plausible placeholder for the Broly movie events? Some people would argue that the anime manga of the Broly movie is the correct placeholder. Let me know your thoughts. But I think one thing we need to look at initially is the character in the manga that actually is the closest representation to Broly that we have, other than Broly himself of course, and that is Kale. Kale appeared in the Tournament of Power, so quite early on in the Dragon Ball Super manga, and it must be pointed out that the manga adaptation of Kale is different to that of a depiction in the anime. Now she does go into this Super Saiyan state where her eyes glaze over and she loses her pupils. She's in a complete rage. She doesn't know friend from foe. Kaba and Caulifla, her allies from Universe 6, are even being attacked by her, and they are Super Saiyan as well, and you can clearly see a difference between their Super Saiyan hair colour and hers. But is there a difference between hers and Broly's? Now it is important to note that around the time of this particular manga arc coming out, the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie was also in the works, and there were statements surrounding that movie, and it basically compares Broly to Kale. It's really regarding the legendary status of this particular Saiyan within their universe and the rage that they feel when they go into this form. But here's what it says. Densetsu means legend or legendary. The new Dragon Ball Super Broly movie focuses on Broly, who was previously called the Legendary Super Saiyan, obviously that's Z Broly. But what makes him Densetsu? Kale may be giving us a preview with her feats in the manga. Her strength is pretty legendary. So in preparation for the Broly movie, Kale is giving us a preview. They are directly linked. They are referring to Dragon Ball Super Broly movie when talking about them being Densetsu or legendary. You could say they're legendary Saiyans, not legendary Super Saiyans, but they are legendary Saiyans that become a Super Saiyan who have their very own unique Super Saiyan form. The article continued further about Kale. Bozu, I think I pronounced that right, means acting out of control or rampaging. The problem with the legendary Saiyan, as seen with Broly and Kale, is that they completely lose control of themselves. That can be a problem when it's a team battle. Kale ends up eliminating her own teammates. As we know, Broly does lose control of himself, even in the current training regime they're undergoing on Beerus's planet. All of the training is directed at Broly concerning him actually keeping control of himself and not just going out into a rage and destroying Beerus's planet. and he attacks his own teammates. As we saw, technically he was on Frieza's team in the Broly movie. Obviously, Kale is the legendary Super Saiyan of Universe 6 and Broly is the legendary Super Saiyan of Universe 7, and we know that Broly is vastly more powerful than Kale based on their actual performances against Goku and co. But what about the colouring of the hair in the coloured manga? Now, there's an example on your screen right now, and the reason I've used the Kale and Broly examples are because they are basically linked to each other by the franchise itself. There is a slight tinting difference between the two, or a slight shading difference, but I don't think it's an enormous difference. Now, Broly doesn't have the green tint in his hair that you would attribute to the legendary Super Saiyan Broly from either Z or the version that you see in the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, where they stated that Toei were the ones that chose to give him this green tint in his hair because it was a flashback to the Z Broly. However, Kale doesn't necessarily have that much of a green tint in her hair either at this particular point. There is the slight tint, but that could have been because of the lighting or shading of the particular panel, as well as the fact that she has an aura around her quite a lot in the Tournament of Power, and that's usually a greenish yellow aura. So that could have been affecting it. But ultimately, there's not a huge difference. Now, interestingly enough, the character that does have the green tint to their hair is the fusion of Caulifla and Kale, Kefla. Take a look at this. Kefla's hair really does have the green tint. However, unlike Broly and Kale beforehand, where they've lost their pupils, Kefla has her pupils back, the regular Super Saiyan pupils. So why exactly does Kefla have this green tint that's attributed to the legendary Super Saiyan, and Kale and Broly don't have that type of hair color? Well, I offer to you that it could be to do with the fact that Kefla is in control of herself due to the fact that it's a fusion, and Caulifla has control of her power, so therefore Kefla has control of the legendary power that resides within Kale and part of that fusion. So it might be that once somebody like Broly or Kale learns to control their Super Saiyan state, that it becomes that legendary green tinted form that we all know and love. Just to point out that obviously Caulifla has the basic golden Super Saiyan hairstyle that's very similar to Cabba's, Vegeta's and Goku's, etc. But still, even if you wanted to compare Broly's to hers, then there is a slight shading difference there as well. So the differences are very slight. If you wanted to grandstand that difference being an example of Broly not having the legendary Super Saiyan form, I think you're really picking hairs. But as we know from the movie, it's called Super Saiyan Full Power. I believe that this is just the initiation into that legendary Super Saiyan state. I do believe it's part of the legendary Super Saiyan state, but I believe you could call it legendary Super Saiyan sign, very similar to Ultra Instinct sign. It's a sign, the gateway into that legendary Super Saiyan state that we will probably get from Broly in the future when he snaps again. Remember, this is a demonic form stated by Cabba and Caulifla, but I believe it's just their Super Saiyan operating at full power, but there is a difference between this form and the Super Saiyan Full Power or Grade 4 form that we saw in the Cell games. But also, this chapter shows us Broly's eyes before turning Super Saiyan when Frieza killed Paragus and told Broly that it was a stray energy blast. And a lot of people have disputed for quite a long time whether or not Broly has his Ikari state, which we know is an humanoid Uzaru state in his base form. It was really hard to tell from the images in black and white, but you could clearly see that there was an eye there that could potentially represent Ikari, but wasn't as distinct as it was in the movie, and his hair does somewhat seem different, and people are pointing out that his hair isn't on end like it was in the movie. But it's also important to point out that even in the movie, when he first got his Ikari form, it wasn't until he buffed up later on that his hair started to stand on end. But these images clearly show that there is a yellow brownish tint to his eyes at this particular point. Now, I've always offered that we see these pupils before he eventually sees Paragus and then he snaps, and that to me always indicated that he does have his Ikari state. But even then, you know, I didn't feel like it was a concrete offering. Still, and as you can see, when Kale transformed, her eyes were different. They didn't have the same colour. I think this does represent his Ikari state, and I do think he has his Super Saiyan Full Powered state. I just don't think the hair colouring from the movie has translated to the manga, but his hair doesn't really differ that much from Kale's in the manga either, who is the legendary Saiyan equivalent from Universe 6. Regardless, in terms of power scaling, it still took Gogeta Blue Kamehameha to finish him off, whether he has whichever version of Super Saiyan he has. Obviously, we know he can't turn Super Saiyan anymore because he cannot do it either reliably without losing control, or just cannot do it in totality. I told you so. But ultimately, I want you guys to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Does Broly have Ikari from these images? And does he have the Legendary Super Saiyan state or Super Saiyan full powered state? And will he get any new transformation in the future? Drop your thoughts down in the comment section. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can visit my community tab where there's often polls as well as posts talking about new information that's come out concerning Dragon Ball. Until next time, Ad Astra.